more than really hopeful. That makes me feel a whole lot better.
Right.
I recall when this topic was first introduced to me, actually, Dr. Johnson, you first spoke with me about this, and you showed the film that Dr. Howe just mentioned, this NOVA film. And in that film, they talk about twins. And they gave some very clear examples of twins. And I remember these two women in particular. One was struggling with cancer, and one wasn't, yet they were living their lives very differently.
Yes, actually, one of the things that's very encouraging is the fact that not only, well, we know, for instance, that we genetically pass things on to our offspring. And we tend to think that that is most of the action. But the epigenetic effect is also transmitted. Genes are difficult to change. They can change with certain adverse impacts from external environmental things. And genes can change and cause cancer and so forth. And sometimes genes, since they're difficult to change, we tend to think they're almost like chiseled in marble. And epigenetics, people think this may have the feeling of the same situation, but epigenetics are much easier to change than our genes. So what happens with epigenetics, by the decisions of lifestyle that we adopt, it can actually affect our genes to suppress certain genes. For instance, if you inherit a tendency for diabetes, and we know that's passed on from generation to generation frequently. But now what we're learning is maybe part of that is not so much just genetic, it may be epigenetic as well. And epigenetics, as Tim says, epigenetics are changeable. You can, by changing your pattern of living, and parents can pass on good health to their children by being careful about their activities. And your grandparents do have some effect, there's no question about that, even on both genetic and epigenetic level. But by you changing your pattern and your husband changing his pattern, as Tim says, they both contribute. And the lifestyle that they have lived also is contributory. But by changing that and living a good lifestyle, you add something to your child which is priceless.
Absolutely.
And it seems to me that this would be good news for people who are anticipating having children, that they can have a legacy they can pass on to their child for good or ill by following a lifestyle that does not take these things into consideration. They can pass on to their child a legacy of difficulty which will last that child's entire life perhaps,
Right.
especially if they do not make a change. So the good news about epigenetics is you can change that, and even predispositions that you inherit genetically can be overridden by the epigenetic effect.
My husband, years ago, had high cholesterol, and he was told, well, it's your genetics. Your mom has it, your dad has it, you've got it, suck it up. He changed his lifestyle, specifically his diet, dramatically, and now his cholesterol is almost as good as mine. We're in a neck and neck race for it. But he's down in the 130s versus being over 200. Is that part of what we're talking about here? Is it the concept that our genes load the gun and with our lifestyle we pull the trigger?
To some extent, of course, his drop in cholesterol is probably dietary more than epigenetic, but his tendency toward other problems that the dietary change invokes can drop epigenetically. There's a fascinating study published in the National Academy of Science, July 2008. Dean Ornish was the head author there. And he took men that had prostate cancer and measured which genes were switched on epigenetically and which were switched off. Took these men and put them on a very careful plant-based diet, stress reduction, and we haven't mentioned that, but stress affects your epigenetics too, and attitude affects gene expression as well. He put them on this lifestyle change program and found some fascinating things. He measured 500 different genes after 3 months on a plant-based diet with stress reduction, 453 cancer-promoting genes were switched off.
Wow.
Now, this is fascinating. I mean, it gives a whole different aspect. These are men that already had cancer.
Wow.
We weren't trying to prevent it. They already had prostate cancer. And he was able to show that the epigenetics changed enough in 3 months to downregulate tumor growth. Other studies have shown that a similar diet, the PSA, or prostate-specific antigen markers, fall with changes in diet and lifestyle. So even if you already have cancer, there's hope. You can change your diet, you can change your lifestyle and regulate genes. What wonderful news that is, that even if you've chosen your parents really poorly, you can still impact gene expression.
The hope that comes from that is actually a little bit overwhelming to
It
understand
is.
in
It
some
is.
ways, that I'm at risk for cancer, I'm at risk for heart disease, I'm at risk for diabetes, I'm at risk for a host of things, and yet the choices that I make every day can affect how my genes are expressed.
One of the classic examples of that is breast cancer and the BRCA gene.
Yes.
You know, if you have BRCA gene positive, your chance of getting breast cancer can be, as high as 50%. Well, what about the 50% that don't get breast cancer, even though they have the gene? That's epigenetic expression. And even if you have that gene, you can do things to prevent that tumor from growing. Epigenetically, you can keep those genes switched off by making careful choices with what you eat and how you live and your attitude of life. So fascinating that stress and the attitudes we choose affect gene expression, but it's true.